we should do it.
All right. Well, so welcome everyone to our 1:20 p.m. session here. I will let Aaron introduce himself more thoroughly here in just a moment, but this is Bridging the Employer Workforce Divide with Digital Credentials and Skills. And your presenter today is Aaron Winters from Western Governors University. And so I will turn it over to Aaron so he can take it away. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat and Q&A. So feel free to post whatever you need there. Take it away, Aaron. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. I work at on the enterprise architecture team at WGU, and this is a little bit of background about WGU and the different ways that we're using Salesforce. We're primarily using the CRM platform, but we also have some MuleSoft and Tableau usage as well. So today, primarily just going to be talking about digital credentialing, which touches Salesforce a little bit, but it's also a bit Salesforce adjacent. So okay, so to kick things off, WGU and Upskill America did a study of a recent study of employers and asked about challenges with how do they find candidates. And one of the things that employers shared was that it was difficult to understand what competencies candidates have, and they also shared that it's time-consuming and cumbersome to try to validate the credentials that candidates are sharing in their applications. And then also they mentioned that they would love to be able to see some summary information about candidates and then be able to drill down and see more details for those candidates that get further in the process. And at the same time, we know that students build competencies by completing courses or having work or internship experiences, volunteering, and a bunch of other activities. And it can be challenging to aggregate the full view of that student's competency and their abilities. And this is especially true for adult learners who may have more work experience and a variety of non-traditional educational experiences. So as higher ed professionals, we are uniquely able to bridge this divide, and we can help students more effectively communicate their abilities, and we can also make it easier for employers to match candidates with suitable job opportunities. And in this talk, we're going to look at the tools for supporting digital credentials that are available today, as well as some of the challenges that exist for both learners and employers. Then we're going to explore innovation in the field of digital credentials that could address these challenges. And finally, we'll wrap up with some action items and resources that you can all take away from the talk. So we're going to kick things off by looking at a typical journey of a digital credential in the context of a credential being issued by a higher ed institution. So the journey typically starts off with a system internal to the university where we use to define our curriculum and our offerings and in the associated skills with those offerings. So students, as they complete their coursework, their academic record is continually being updated with a history of courses they've passed, skills that they've gained. This data is often referred to as a student's achievements. So in order to convert these achievements into digital credentials that can be shared, universities will typically use a badge issuance system. So university generates a badge using data from the academic record, and that badge data will include the email address of the student, which serves as the identifier for the recipient. And they send that badge data to the student, typically as a link to a public web page. The student can then obviously share that badge link on social media or on the resume or in a job application. And students can import the badge in the achievement wallet to keep all their badges in one place and control who has access to which credentials. But regardless of whether the badge is shared directly via a URL to the badge issuance system or via being shared from the achievement wallet, the badge is typically almost always verified by a human going back to that public web page where the badge is hosted. While it is possible today to do automatic verification of badges, it's difficult to pull off because of a wide variety of systems and protocols in place. So it's not widely adopted today. So let's take a closer look at some of these systems that are in play in this journey. So all of us have internal systems that we use to model our institution's programs and courses and course offerings and any associated achievements that come with completing those courses and programs. As we mentioned, a lot of the modern systems today are using achievements to model the outcome of completing a course. And at their core, achievements should be associated with a collection of skills so that when the achievement is awarded to the learner, those skills get added to their profile and it kind of tells a story about what they can do as a result of the achievement. And within these systems, there's usually some functionality for managing skills, which allows you to author and edit skills, organize them in collections, and can move in other systems, so they can be associated with jobs or with curriculum, etc. At WGU, we use an open source tool called the Open Skill Management Tool for creating that central database of skills. And we use a custom in-house tool for modeling our curriculum. We recently did a proof of concept with Education Cloud, and we were pretty pleased with some of the functionality we saw there for modeling curriculum and creating that learning catalog, which includes a space to save skills data. Regardless of the tool that you're using at your institution, it's important that we use a common approach to describing the skills so that when employers are looking at student profiles or job applications, they're seeing consistent language and they're able to make sense of those skills more easily. And the most widely used standard for defining skills is called the Rich Skill Descriptor, or RSD standard. So this is probably an obvious one to everyone here. As students accumulate achievement at university, all those achievements, in addition to the courses that they transferred in, are part of their academic record. And that's typically housed in the student information system. And we use Banner at WGU. Education Cloud recently introduced capability to support this as well. And so next we get to the badge issuance system. Typically 3 buckets of capabilities in a badge issuance system. First is capabilities that are geared towards staff who work at the university configuring or administering the system. So they have the ability to create badge templates. They can issue or revoke badges either manually through the UI or automatically through an API integration. And obviously there's some ability to store the badge data and create reports and analytics, etc. The next bucket of capabilities is student-facing. So students can create their identity, typically with an email address, and they can authenticate to the platform. They can accept or decline digital badges that have been issued to them. They can view all their badges either from across any institution that uses that same badging system, and then they can share their badges via like a public link or on social media. And the last bucket of capabilities that we commonly see is public-facing capabilities. And so typically there's something around being able to share a university's public catalog of all the digital credentials or badges that they offer. And that's a great resource for employers who are trying to learn more about what that badge means and what skills are associated with getting that credential. And then obviously verification. So when a learner shares the link with an employer, that employer can use the link to go back and verify that the badge was in fact issued to that issuer and that it's active. So WGU, we primarily use Canvas credentials for this function. It's formerly known as Badger, so you may see that name floating around as well. We'll take a brief pause along the journey to just explore the anatomy of what a digital credential or badge actually looks like. So there are different schools of thought about what should be badgeable. It can be as small as a trailhead module, so I'm sure most of us have experienced, or it could be as large as a whole bachelor's degree. And at WGU, we typically are issuing badges for completion of a course and for completion of a certificate. So the image on the right shows what a digital badge would look like that's been issued via Canvas credentials. And the image on the left shows the underlying data for that badge. And the data is structured in Open Badges 2 format. Open Badges 2 is a standard that's maintained by one ed tech, and it's the most widely adopted data standard for digital credentials today. Open Badges 2 comes with 3 different sort of data structures. One is for the issuer, which includes information about the university. The second is the badge class, which is sort of like that badge template data, what the badge is, information about it, the image, etc. And the third is the assertion, and that basically just means the actual issuance of the badge to an individual. So it includes their identifier, when they were issued it, things like that. So those objects can all be shared individually with links to each other, or they can be combined into a single data structure. And this example is of an assertion data structure when it has that badge class and issuer data included. And there's a couple of points I want to call out about how this works today, and because it'll be relevant as we talk about some of the challenges. So you'll notice that throughout this data structure, there are links back to the credentialing platform. In this case, Canvas Credentials, which uses the Badger URL. So most credentials today are verified by visiting a public link that's provided by the credentialing platform. The recipient identity is handled by their email address. In this case, the email address has been hashed for data privacy purposes. Under the hood, that is actually the email address. And then finally, skills are included in this alignment section. And it's the open, or the skills, rich skills descriptor standard that's maintained by the Open Skills Network that provides the guidance for how do you include skills in using that description language and structure, and how do you include that in the right way, in a consistent way, in the Open Badges 2 digital credentials. This one obviously just has one skill, but usually you'd see dozens and dozens of skills, but just truncated to fit it on the screen. Okay, so continuing on the journey, an achievement wallet holds credentials, and the role of the wallet is to aggregate credentials across universities or other types of issuers and badging systems. Many wallets also provide a space to add self-attested or also called non-verified achievements, and that could be like work experience or some trainings that they completed or their portfolio of work, etc. And some wallets even provide a space to add a full profile similar to LinkedIn. So a key capability of all wallets, though, is that they enable students to control their own data, and the students get to decide how much to share and with whom. Students should also be able to export their data if they choose to move to a different wallet, for etc. So this is a screenshot of WGU's achievement wallet, which aggregates all of the skills a learner has gained in association with all of their digital credentials and helps learners identify target professions that they might want to pursue. And then they can see some of the skills gaps that they might need to address in order to pursue those professions. Aside from this wallet, there's also other options out there that are pretty solid and we're checking out. Some from the National Student Clearinghouse, LearnCard has one, and then the Digital Credentials Consortium provides an open source achievement wallet geared towards a higher education use case. So in our conversations with employers, it seemed like almost everybody is using LinkedIn as the primary tool for searching and screening candidates. But this could also be handled by an applicant tracking system such as Workday or Bamboo HR. And in the case of LinkedIn, students add links from, into their LinkedIn profile. They can add links back to their digital credentials so that recruiters can verify the credentials are valid. All right, so if you think about it from a recruiter standpoint, a recruiter might have to sift through hundreds of applications to a job, and each applicant might have dozens of credentials, and it could be from several institutions. So the recruiter has to go through and manually verify credentials from various sources at a pretty large scale. So the process doesn't scale very well. The other thing we've seen is that it's difficult to understand what the competencies actually mean. Each institution might have their own way of describing the credentials that they issue, or which increases the effort because recruiters have to go and try to make sense of what this data says and how meaningful it is and what does it mean from one institution to the next. Some credentials may include information about the skills that were gained as part of that achievement, and some may not have skills data. So what it comes down to is the recruiter effectively has to know enough about the credential and the institution issuing the credential to make a judgment call on how credible this is. So this puts students from less well-known universities or non-traditional experiences at a disadvantage in the hiring process. The good news is that there are solutions to these challenges on the horizon. One of the most exciting innovations around digital credentials is verifiable credentials. And verifiable credentials is a W3C standard for using cryptography to digitally prove something about yourself. This could apply to a driver's license or vaccine card or obviously academic credentials. One EdTech, the same creators of Open Badges 2, have adapted verifiable credentials for the higher education sector with a new standard called Open Badges 3. So I want to talk through what the journey would look like when a digital credential is structured as a verifiable credentials using that new Open Badges 3 format. So the very first step is that the university creates a public-private key pair, and the private key is going to be used to digitally sign all the credentials that are issued. Then the public key gets saved to a public registry that's trusted as a source for which keys are associated with which universities. The rest of the steps within the university are the same as before, right? The curriculum is defined and the skills are associated. The student completes courses at the university and the academic record gets kind of built out over time. And then the university generates badge data that includes the email address as the student's identity and sends the student the badge, typically with, via that link to the public webpage. But now the badge is digitally signed using the university's private key. So instead of going back and looking at a web page, what you need to verify the badge is actually built into the data itself. So the student then, they import that digital credential into their achievement wallet. When the student applies for a job, the job employment app asks for proof that the applicant has experienced, whether or not the applicant has experience related to the job that they're hiring for. The learner presents that employment app with the badge that they're using in the digital wallet, and the job employment app can then verify several things automatically. They can verify that the learner providing the badge is the actual recipient of that badge. They can verify that the issuer did in fact issue that badge. And finally, they can verify that the badge data has not been changed since it was issued. So verifiable credentials can solve that challenge of validating credentials at scale. And there are a number of benefits to verifiable credentials in higher education. We mainly talked about that they're tamper-proof and that they can be verified instantly without needing to contact the university directly. But there are also a number of data privacy and security benefits. So as I mentioned, Tech has published a new standard for digital credentials called Open Badges 3. And I just want to highlight a few key changes with the new standard. The first is that the structure aligns to verifiable credentials. So they have all the benefits that we just talked about. It's a single JSON structure instead of 3 different data structures. And then there are also some new attributes and objects that provide new capabilities, like the ability to support endorsements, and the issuer and creator can be different entities, things like that. And then finally, one of the things that we're really excited about for the future is that Open Badges 3 can be embedded within larger umbrella standards, such as the Learning and Employment Record Resume Standard. We think this will become more important in the future. So we talked about how adopting verifiable credentials can help bridge the student-employer divide by enabling credential verification at scale. But we can also address the challenge of helping employers make sense of credentials issued by different universities by adopting common language for describing credentials and skills. We talked about the rich skills descriptor guidelines published by the Open Skills Network, and that can provides direction for how to describe skills and how they should be embedded both in Open Badges 2 and in Open Badges 3 data. The Credential Transparency Description language, which is published by the Credential Engine, provides guidelines for how to describe the credentials themselves, the name, the description, and criteria, etc. And lastly, we can provide employers with a single place to go to view and learn more about all the credentials by adding our university's credentials to the credential registry, which is also hosted by the Credential Engine. So to illustrate that last point, one change you may see in this data, and it's a little hard to see because it's kind of scrunched down, but all the links back to the source are actually pointing to the credential registry instead of pointing back to Canvas credentials. So on the student side, students are struggling to pull together an aggregate view of all their experience and competencies from various employers and educational institutions. And this is especially challenging for older learners. One innovation that might be of interest to you is the Learner Information Framework, which is an initiative funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the goal of there is basically analogous to electronic medical records that exist in healthcare today. So the idea is that we are able to use technology in healthcare to share electronic medical records across healthcare systems, which gives patients a better ability to manage their healthcare, and it gives providers better data to make better decisions based on a full medical history. So the vision is to create this type of comprehensive portal record for the workforce to employer sector. We could spend an entire session exploring the details of the various standards and how they relate to each other and the data sources. So I won't go into the details here because we're running short on time, but I did want to share that WGU is pursuing a credentialing capability model based on open standards as much as possible so that any higher ed institution can take advantage of what we are learning and contributing to the space. And I'm happy to connect offline if that's relevant to any of the work that you're doing at your university. And speaking of the work that you're doing at your university, no meeting should end without people getting action items. But I do hope that you can see that as higher ed professionals, we have the ability to help learners demonstrate their competencies and help employers more effectively find matching candidates for open jobs. So these are some steps that you can take at your university in this direction. So make sure you're using the rich skills descriptor whenever you're adding or modifying skills to your libraries. Use the credential transparency description language when you're creating your digital badges. Get your credentials and badges added to Credential Engine's registry if you haven't already. And make sure your badge issuance system supports open badges 2 or 3. Not all of them do support that standard. And finally, start experimenting with an achievement wallet for your students if you don't already have one. And a really quick, I know that's a long list of action items for a group of people who are already really busy. But the good news is that we're not alone. We can ask Salesforce to help as well. So we've been really pleased with what we're seeing with the Education Cloud data model, but it would be great that if they can ensure that the skills records that are created there align to the rich skills descriptor standard to help universities get off on the right foot. And all of the data that we're seeing that needs to be pulled in order to create Open Badges 2 and 3 data is actually supported or could be found from the Education Cloud data model. It would be pretty easy for Salesforce to provide that feature to just generate that data automatically so that to help facilitate our integration with badging systems. And finally, we'd love to see Salesforce move more towards open standards for Salesforce certifications. Many of our students, as well as many of us, have Salesforce certifications, and the only way for employers to verify those certifications is to manually enter our email address or other identifying information into the Trailhead verification page. So lastly, here's a list of resources related to topics covered in this session. I hope you've gained some tangible tools and next steps for how you can evolve digital credentials at your institution. Thank you. Are we out of time, Carrie, or do we take a question?
We are out of time, but thank you very much, Aaron. I pasted the link from Aaron's presentation into the chat as well for you, so you can access his list of resources, which is really great. Let's definitely give him a round of applause for sharing all of this great information. I don't think we had any questions in the Q&A that I saw, Aaron, but I'm sure people are welcome to reach out to you directly if they'd like to discuss this in more detail, right?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you everyone for coming to the session.